welcome to the Pig and Whistle Tales from Azeroth. As always, here at the Pig and Whistle Inn in Stormwind, I go through a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft. So grab a bottle or a pint, sit back and enjoy. Today, we're going to be going over add-ons within World of Warcraft, and more specifically, what add-ons I would use and recommend for casual PvP and raiding. These are ones that I tend to use a lot, and they each have their own different benefits, their own different drawbacks and stuff, and obviously you can switch some of them out for other things. So I'm not going to be going over any UI add-ons, because that's all very much your opinionate, or very opinionated in terms of how you like your UI to look. Essentially, I can give you a few of them as I'm going through to try out and test, but honestly, it's down to you. You've got to find the right UI to sort you, or to suit you, essentially. But as always, we will be starting off with the weekly news. So we have the world bosses for this week are Valinor, Morgeth and Antros in their respective zones of Bastion, the Moor and Zereth Mortis. Valinor and Castle Nathria are the fated raids for this week, so make sure you're getting your loot from these raids and world bosses. You get increased item level on gear, more anima, etc. The bonus event for this week is Shadowlands Dungeons, which means that you get an extra piece of loot from the end boss of every single dungeon, which is really nice for gearing ults. Comp Stomp is the favorited brawl for this week. It is a favorite of a lot of people in the PvP scene, as you can get a lot of honor very fast, so that you can upgrade your gear very quickly. Raging, Explosive, Fortified and Shrouded are your mythic affixes for this week. Raging, when a mob gets to 30% or below, it will have 100% increased damage, so either soothe the mob or help your tank kite it, kill it very fast, CC it, do whatever you can. Just make sure your tank doesn't drop like a sack of shit. We have Explosive. Make sure these little orbs are destroyed, killed off very quickly if you are within line of sight of them. If they detonate, it will cause a lot of damage and will really... My words are sort of molded into one there. It will really stress out your healer and their mana. Essentially, it will tax their mana very heavily. So help out your healer and destroy these explosive orbs. Don't get hit by them. They are a priority. Fortified is your... Is it bi-weekly mythic affix? Yeah, I think it's... Yeah, bi-weekly mythic affix. It is the bosses and the minions that they spawn have increased health and damage. So make sure... Nope, I lied. It is the other way around. This is where the mobs in the dungeon, which are non-boss enemies, have increased damage and health. So make sure you bring some AoE or pop some extra cooldowns on the mobs within the dungeons, which aren't bosses. Shrouded is your seasonal affix. Once again, you find the Nathrazim that are in the crowd in the dungeon, and you kill them for a stat boost, and this can go on up to about 30% increased stats. This is the stat of your choosing, by the way, so you can change this at any time. The spell that we're going to be looking over the history of this week is Vampiric Touch. I've touched on a lot of pre-spells. I touched on Vampiric Embrace, Dispersion, stuff like that, but I never realised I didn't, touch on Vampiric Touch. That's saying touch too many times. So yeah, it was added in patch 2.0 back in 2006 of Burning Crusade. It got its first change in patch 3.0 2 years later. The Vampiric Touch's mana restoration effect is redesigned. Mind Blast damage now triggers the replenishment effect, causing up to 10 party or raid members to gain 0.25% of their maximum mana per second. The previous effect was it causes all party members to gain mana equal to 5% of any shadow spell damage that you deal. It got a small change a month later. The spell power coefficient has been doubled and no longer triggers replenishment when other priests cast Mind Blast. Vampiric Touch cast Shadow Form now deals increased damage percent equal to the player's chance to get spell crit on their target. Jesus, so many things in there that my brain couldn't process it as well. Several months later, it got its first major change in patch 3.1. When dispelled, Vampiric Touch now deals damage to the affected target, while in shadow form, bonus damage from critical strike chance removed and replaced by the ability generate critical strikes. Okay, makes sense. Got a small change later on in patch 3.2, 4 months later. The amount of damage done when this spell is dispelled has been doubled. Makes sense. You get a little bit out of it because it's not on the target. You're not getting any benefit from it either way. Patch 3.3, 4 months later. While in shadow form, Vampiric Touch will gain benefit from haste rating. This is a big one because haste is very important for priests. You want to be casting your spells as quickly as possible. You want to be channeling your mind flay as quickly as possible. Haste is very, very good in Wrath of the Lich King. It is not to be underestimated. Then in Cataclysm, a year later, it no longer causes damage upon being dispelled. Dispel protection is now available from the talent Sin and Punishment. And what this talent does is when your Vampiric Touch is dispelled, the Dispeller and all nearby enemy targets within 6 yards have a 100% chance to instantly be feared. This, I believe, later on became baseline for the ability. It got its next change in patch 4.2 a year later. Damage done has been decreased by 12%. In addition, Sin and Punishment's Vampiric Touch Backlash Fear effect no longer has diminishing returns. Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, actually, because once you're feared from Vampiric Touch, essentially it would only be 1.5 seconds, then 7.75 seconds, and then, yeah, you're on diminishing return. It kind of makes sense that it didn't get a diminishing return because once you're on that, you can just press Dispel constantly and not get punished for it. It got its changes later in Missa Pandaria, a year later actually. No longer triggers replenishment. Instead, each time damage is dealt, the caster gains 2% of the maximum mana. Okay, so it's just a more utility base for yourself. Patch 5.4, a whole year later again, it now just deals 20% more damage, essentially. Then it got its change in Warlords of Draenor. Guess what? A year later. Dispersion and Vampiric Touch no longer restore mana. Base mana regeneration rate for Shadow Priest has been increased by 200%. Vampiric or Shadow Ward Pain and Vampiric Touch mana costs have been reduced by 50% to compensate. Kind of makes sense. This is kind of when they went to the... In terms of who loses mana, it's very few specs. It's all healer classes in raiding or mythic PvP. Arcane mages lose a lot of mana very quickly when casting spells, but DPS don't really lose mana unless you're casting, say, heals. So Shadow Mend, which is soon to be gone for priests, by the way. Regrowth for druids, maybe Flash of Light for paladins, that kind of thing. In, 2 years later, actually, in Legion, Vampiric Touch now heals the priest for 50% of the damage dealt and now generates Insanity upon application. Duration increased from 15 to 18 seconds. The Dispel Backlash has been built into the spell. So yeah, this is when it became 3 seconds baseline, where if it got dispelled, the caster who dispelled it would be feared for 3 seconds. That's when it was made baseline. In a few months later, in patch 7.1.5, it generates 6 Insanity when cast instead of 4, and its duration is now 24 seconds instead of 18 seconds, so a little buff. And then it got a small hotfix a week later. Vampiric Touch's damage has been reduced by 14%, and the damage of Vampiric Touch is reduced by 25% in PvP situations. They clearly did not like how much damage that was doing. It got loads of hotfixes, so I'm just going to rattle these off. These were all within the same year. Vampiric Touch now deals 10% less damage in PvP situations, was 25% less, so a little buff there. Vampiric Touch damage reduced by 15% in PvP situations, so a little nerf there. Hotfix in testing fixed a bug that made Void Eruption's Vampiric Touch missile display incorrectly. Okay, small, uh, what is it? Visual bug. That's the one. And then it got its next change a year later in patch 8.0, which is Battle for Azeroth. The duration has been reduced to 21 seconds, down from 24. 8. I said 8.2. 8.0 is when that change was made. 8.2, damage reduced by 9%. 8.3, damage reduced by 8%. Poor Vampiric Touch, man. Its damage has just gone down and down throughout the years. And then finally in Shadowlands, several months later, now available at level 15, was 24. And the generation of insanity has been reduced to 5 instead of 6. Vampiric Touch has been through a lot. It's been through a lot, I will say. But it seems like it's in a good place. I quite liked the idea of it being a mana resource. But since they shifted away from that in about Warlords of Draenor, it didn't really make sense that it replenished mana, essentially. So kind of makes a lot of sense. But it is where it is right now. I like it. Not the fundamentals of the spell haven't changed that much. Essentially, it restored mana, but now it doesn't. Instead, it gives you insanity, which is your new resource for Shadow Priest over mana, essentially. So it's in a good place. But let's get into the, like I always say, the meat and bones of the episode. Add-ons in WoW. I'm going to start off with the general ones. Some of these you might have, you might not, but I'll be going over them, what they do, that kind of thing. And then we'll move into the PvP and then finally raiding, because some of these aren't necessarily needed for casual play if you're just looking to have fun with the game and level, not necessarily do a lot of endgame content like raiding or arenas. So, Wrath of the Lich King. This one's purely Wrath of the Lich King, by the way, this add-on. Questy. It is a must. Unless you want a real authentic experience where you do not see where you have to go, you have to read the quests, you have to explore the world, you have to understand where things are within Northrend, within the zones that you're in. What Questy does is essentially gives you, when you open your map, it shows you where you need to go and kill stuff, where you need to go and collect stuff for your quests. And in World of Warcraft, Wrath of the Lich King Classic, they do not have this implementation yet. They do not have this because it came in Wrath, and they didn't actually think that they were going to add it to the game. But a lot of people were crying out for it, because what's the point in having Questy when you actually have an in-game functionality for it? It makes no sense. So that will be coming at a later phase in World of Warcraft, and then Questy will be a little bit anonymous and not needed. But for now, Questy is really important if you want to do leveling at a decent pace and not have to worry. You can mindlessly do it without having to read through the quests to, explore the zones. Now, I do have to say, please explore the zones and read the quests. They are very good. They are very important. And they build the world. They build the world of Azeroth and, everything within it. So the quests are very important to read. A lot of people have taken a lot of time to put in the work, to do the text, to do, the stories behind them and stuff, especially in Northrend quests. There's reasons why you do everything, especially in like Icecrown, in Storm Peaks, it all leads up to the raids, Icecrown Citadel, Ulduar. So they're really important, and it's very nice to just sit back and enjoy the questing sometimes, rather than just speed through it and essentially complete it and get bored and not know what's happening within the actual game itself because you never read any of the quests. It's one of them things. So Questy, I would very much recommend for the casual player, especially if this is your first MMO. It's going to help. It's going to help in Wrath Classic. If you are in retail, so Dragonflight as it is now, currently Shadowlands, but soon to be Dragonflight, I would very much recommend not using it because you don't need to. The game has its own built-in Questy, essentially, in retail. Questy. Oh no, for add-ons, go to Curseforge. By the way, there are multiple, but I think Curseforge is currently the one that's being eaten up, or not eaten up, devouring all of the other add-ons, WoW add-on sites. So definitely go to Curseforge. It's very simple. You can just download it, and yeah, it's not too tough really. But yeah, moving on to the next one, Atlas. Atlas Loot. So Atlas Loot is very much, you get to see what you can purchase within World of Warcraft. I would purely recommend for Wrath again, Wrath Classic. Atlas Loot allows you to look at all of the dungeons and see what the bosses drop in all of these dungeons, the same as PvP vendors, and how much currency you need to buy a certain piece from a PvP vendor, as well as reputations. You can see what you can get from the reputations, honored, revered, exalted, etc. So it's just a book that essentially shows you what you can buy from every single NPC in the game, nearly, or the big ones like the dungeon, or the emblems in Wrath of the Lich King, all the way to PvP and even reputation, like I said. So it's very good for just seeing what you need to improve your character, essentially. But I wouldn't recommend it if you're looking to just play it very casually and, again, not look to do much at the end of World of Warcraft, the end game, like raiding or improving your character that much. You can just go around and explore, do quests, have fun with the zones, that kind of thing. It's not necessarily a must-have, but it's very nice to just see or have if you are doing end-game content in Wrath. Now, this one is my go-to, but there are multiple. I have Auctionator. Auctionator for Wrath of the Lich King just makes it very simple. It makes the auction house very simple, kind of like the auction house in retail right now. It means that you're not having to scroll through so many things in order to find what you actually need. It's got multiple lists there of what you need, and you can chain buy items instead of having to click on a single item, then confirm pay and stuff. You can just click on the item, confirm, and then keep clicking. You can just spam click and buy out the entire stock on the auction house if you really wanted, but wouldn't recommend. Yeah, I would definitely recommend an auction add-on, purely because the auction house in Classic is kind of clunky when it comes to you wanting to buy stuff or sell stuff, especially selling stuff. You're constantly having to remember the price or the lowest price of what you're trying to sell so that you can beat the price or of what they're trying to sell so you can beat the price of theirs. Whereas these add-ons just make it instant. They search the auction house when you put it into its tiny box or square, and it says, oh, this is the lowest one on the auction house you're pricing it at, and it will automatically price it for you at a copper less or whatever. A bit ridiculous, but it still does it for you, and it's very nice to have. It's a very good quality of life thing. It's something that I would recommend if you're using the auction house consistently. Not even consistently, like once a week. It's just a very good quality of life add-on, and not much more to say about it, really. Weak auras. Now, weak auras are kind of... I'm going to put that in raiding. I'll put that in raiding and come back to weak auras. Titan panel is one that I find is a very, very useful. So what Titan panel is, it puts a panel, just a very thin line at the top of your screen. You can change this. You can have it so that it isn't there and it's only revealed when you put your mouse to the top of the screen. You can do a lot of things with it. But essentially, what it's there for is to give you info on what is on your account. So what I have on mine is the bag space that I'm currently using on the character. I have 80 slots available out of the entirety of my bags, and I'm currently only have 6 slots available, so it'll be 74 out of 80. So it's very nice. It would show me the total gold that I have on my entire account, as well as the gold on each individual character. If you hover over it, it can tell you the time, it can tell you the coordinates in-game that you are, it can tell you the location that you are, instead of, looking at the minimap bit. It can do a lot. but these are the only sort of features that I want on my Titan panel. And you can choose you can choose where it is. I'm pretty sure you can put it down the side of your screen. You can put it anywhere, but essentially, yeah, it's just a nice little info reel that you can alter however you like. You can have nothing up there. You can just have the amount of gold that you have on your account. That's fine. You can have that. But if that's what you want, I would recommend a bag add-on, because that will also keep track of your gold on other characters and etc. So there's stuff like Bagnon, which is very good at doing that and stuff. But yeah, Titan panel is a really nice little funky thing to have at the top of the screen. And it might look intrusive at the start, but honestly, you won't recognize it. You won't recognize it once you've been dealing with it for about a week. It's just part of your screen now. So PvP-wise, I'm going to go into some of these. These are very opinionated. Very, very opinionated. There's loads of PvP add-ons out there, and I would recommend finding the setup for you. But two things that I use in an arena. I use Gladius EX and S Arena. So S Arena I use purely on the basis of how it looks. So it will show me the enemy on the right-hand side. It will show me Rogue Mage Priest. Yep. It will show me their health, their mana, their trinkets, and their, dispels or whatever. Their remove curse, dispels, whatever it is. But Gladius, I use to track cooldowns. So I get to specify what cooldowns are picked. I get to pick them, obviously. And I get to choose if I want to track a mage's ice block and icy veins, for fire combustion, for arcane power. For priests, I can choose to track pain suppression. I can choose to track anything that I want, including their power word shield, which is a spammable ability. It's something, essentially. You've got to find the right PvP setup for you. I prefer these purely on the basis that I get to alter them both and chop and change them whenever I like. S Arena I purely take on the fact that it looks cool or looks better, but Gladius EX has the exact same. It has like the player frames and their health, mana, their trinkets, etc., but you can disable it, which is what I have done. It's just about playing around with them and seeing what you come up with, essentially. But this is what you're going to be looking at on the right-hand side of your screen when it shows the other team, essentially, is what these two cooldowns do. Another one that is so recommended, this is like every PvP player must have, Omnibar. Now, what Omnibar is it tracks cooldowns. Now, you're probably sat there thinking, well, your Gladius EX tracks cooldowns. That is true, but Omnibar tracks them as they are, like, the smaller cooldowns is what you want, essentially. So Omnibar you can use to track enemies' kicks. So counterspell, kick, pummel, mind freeze. Is there any more? Wind shear from shamans. You can track all of them, and it makes it a lot easier because you can put this wherever you want. So you can put this slap bang in the middle of your screen, and you know that a rogue's kick is down as well as a mage's counterspell, so you physically cannot be kicked when casting this. It's that kind of thing. So Omnibar is a must for anyone. And again, you can put anything that you want on here. You can put the offensive cooldowns of the enemy players. So Bladestorm for a warrior, Starfall if you're playing Wrath Classic for a boomkin, or Berserk for a feral druid, that kind of thing. So you can put whatever you want on there, but I would recommend doing kicks if you are a caster. If you're a melee, I would recommend doing offensive cooldowns for the enemy or defensive cooldowns, but Gladius EX, I would recommend to do the defensive cooldowns. That way you kind of have sections. It's like, oh, this is offensive, what they've pressed, this is defensive, so your brain can kind of immediately tell your eyes to look at their defense options if you're about to go on the offensive, and vice versa. Big debuffs is the next one that I would recommend. This is very simple. This puts a large debuff on the target, whether they are stunned. It will put an important debuff on there if they are stunned, CC'd, feared, essentially any sort of form of CC. It will tell you, it will put something on their nameplate or above their nameplate, and it will also put it in their portrait. Yeah, portrait, if you were to click on them. This is both for enemies and allies, so it's just very simple. It means that you can get a lot of information very quickly on what's happening, rather than looking at your healer and being like, why didn't you heal me? Oh, it's because I was blinded by a rogue. It's like, oh, I didn't see. Well, big debuffs eliminates that, essentially. So, raiding. Raiding, I've only got a few, but we'll start off with the weak auras. Now, weak auras, these can go into both PvP, PvE, and very casual. More so PvP and raiding. So what weak auras do is essentially anything. You can tell it to flash like in the middle of your screen whenever a warrior presses Blade Storm. I'll keep going back to that as a reference. Or a mage presses Icy Veins. Or a boss does a certain mechanic within a raid. You can basically tell it to do anything. You can tell it to have an Arthas, a Lich King, dancing in the middle of your screen when a raid boss ability happens. You can do anything with it, essentially. You can, give it a noise. So it's like a massive air horn when a certain ability is about to be channeled or casted. It's one of them things. It can provide so many things, but the potential of it is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. But it's used for simpler things. Like, for instance, what I use it for is my Paladin. So my Paladin was a tank, and essentially, when I do not have Righteous Fury on, it will flash something next to my character portrait, and it will say, idiot. It will literally call me an idiot. This is how good this weak aura is. It's amazing. Because it can do anything. It can literally do anything. You've got to get people to either make you a weak aura or learn to make them yourselves, which I don't think is very tough. Or there is a website called Wagio, wag.io, I'm pretty sure. And that has loads and hundreds of thousands of weak auras. You just import the code into the weak aura and bish bash bosh, that is you done. Deadly boss mods. This is insanely good for any raider or dungeon or Mythic Plus, whatever. But essentially, it tells you the cooldowns on when something is going to happen in a boss fight. So an enrage timer is usually 10 minutes. It will have that enrage timer there for 10 minutes, and it will just keep ticking down. Then it will have certain phases. So we'll just do this for example. There's 3 phases to a fight. They switch every minute. So you start the boss fight and it will say phase 2, 1 minute, and it will start counting down. And it will also say phase 3, 2 minutes, and it will start counting down. So once it counts down, he'll go into phase 2, and then phase 1 will go above phase 3 and have 2 minutes until phase 1 comes back, etc. That kind of thing. So Deadly Boss Mods keeps you up to date and gives you a lot of info on what is happening in the fights, in the boss fights, so that you can focus on your damage rotation, your decursing, your dispels, your positioning, a lot of other things that you have to worry about in boss fights, essentially. The last one I would recommend is decursive. If you are anything that can dispel, mage, druid, priest, shaman, paladin, absolutely anything that can dispel, that, whether it be curses, magic, what are the others, poisons. Decursive will basically tell you what they have, and you either left click or right click on this tiny box to basically say, yeah, I want to decurse you or not. You don't have to click it, but the left click and right click is for those that have 2 different types of dispels. So druids, for example, have a decurse and a remove poison. Right click is the decurse and left click is the remove poison. You can resize these boxes however you like, but essentially it is very good to see who has debuffs on them that you can cleanse. It will only do it for ones that you can cleanse. It will do it for no others. So if you're a mage and you can decurse, and there's a magic debuff on a allied target, it won't say it. It won't prop up because it will say, or it basically says that there's nothing to decurse, and it won't warn you that there's anything on them, essentially. So these are my add-ons that I would recommend. Obviously, these are very much opinion-based. Some of them I would very much recommend, though. Definitely an auction add-on. Quest T4, Wrath Classic. If you're doing any sort of PvP, Omnibar 100% and big debuffs. The arena frames you can, play about with by yourself. For raiding, weak auras, deadly boss mods. 100% them too. There is no doubt about them too. But thank you all very much for listening as always. Be sure to... Oh my god, I can't say words tonight. It's honestly ridiculous. They've merged together. They've just not come out of my mouth. They're stuck in my head. All of the above. But yeah, make sure you check out the Patreon podcast. There's ad-free content going up on there, as well as the Twitch and YouTube. Constant stuff's happening over there, so be sure to check it out. Thank you all very much for listening, as always, and go with Valor, friends.